Well, what I'm wondering is, when Gene was a little fella, didn't his classmates come around
Oh, yes.
and all the I came around, practically everyone
Yes.
I knew came around to see this. This was an
Yes.
annual occasion.
Well, there were some of them that would come every day and every day and every day to see it. And I counted them when they came once. Afterwards, I didn't count them anymore. And one year we had within a few of 1,000 people.
Yeah.
There was a busload came from, where was it? Alpharetta. Came down, a school bus load came down from Alpharetta one evening. And the house was full.
Lots of them came
Come
down.
on, man.
There were lots of them came down from the west on the Sentinel, wrote an article, and we have that tape in the Christmas box.
So it got a lot of publicity, and it grew into quite a thing, for sure. Well, who were some of your faithful visitors from Beavertown?
Well, there was Ink Middlesworth and Dick Eisenhower, Henry Morier, and Edwin Freed. Usually they would come together. Those would come down the road on Christmas morning, and they were here, the first ones here to see it.
That was one of the first things they always did on Christmas morning, you told
Yes.
me.
And then, of course, well, most of the kids, there's a few of them that their parents wouldn't allow them to come to see it, but the majority of the kids came to see the tree.
Oh, yeah, and the setup, the whole setup, the fantastic toy trains and everything. And like Mr. Camp mentioned, during the Depression years, there just weren't a whole lot of homes could afford an elaborate, beautiful thing. So
Well, a lot of these children on the outside of the town that would come here to school didn't even have Christmas trees at home that they would come here to see us.
So therefore, you were really the community Christmas tree and Christmas spirit for many, many years. When did that sort of slow down?
Well, after Gene got big enough that he didn't bother about it anymore, well, we stopped it, and that was back in 1936. That was the last year we had the Christmas tree, in 1936.
Really, that long ago?
Mm-hmm.
I'll be a son of a gun. My goodness, I must have only been 5 years old or so when I came, but I certainly do recall seeing it. Now, you were also involved. When did you folks come to this house, to live in this house?
We went to housekeeping here.
And what year would that have been?
Well, we were married in 1927, and we bought it in January of 1928, and we moved in August of 1928.
So it would have been from 1928 through 1936 that you folks were putting on these fancy Christmas things. In the days that you came to Beavertown, in those days, were you involved with the Ladies Auxiliary?
There was no Ladies Auxiliary at that time. The Ladies Auxiliary, as far as I can figure out, was started in about 1940. It could have been a little while before that. I couldn't find any records at all when it was started. But it was either in around 1938 or 1940 that it was started.
The Ladies Auxiliary was started in the year that we started the Rose Guard.
That would have been 46, 47, or 48 in that.
That's when they started. Yeah.
The Ladies Auxiliary of the Fire Company.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you were very, very active and an officer in that organization for many years.
28 years. I was president for 28 years.
And also, did you folks start the nursery, or did Gene start that?
Well, Gene started the nursery.
But you folks helped out.
We helped him because when you're in the nursery business, you are in that for about 7 years before you get any income. It all goes right back into the nursery.
But prior to Gene's establishing the nursery, you had a beautiful garden, I still do, but Beavertown was the rose capital of the universe, with Glace Orange roses and Guy Narrow's roses and Art Felker's roses, and you guys were right in
and
there.
Rudy had roses. Rudy Coleman had roses.
We have pictures of Rudy's, and we have some pictures of yours, believe it or not, in color.
Guy had taken some pictures.
Right, and that's where we have them from. had a beautiful garden out back. You were always interested in flowers and in gardening. So when you got into the nursery business, why, that was just a natural development of where your interests were before. What do you think, you were a Selinsgrove girl,
And that's right.
and you came to Beavertown as a young lady. What did you think of Beavertown?
Oh, well, I knew Beavertown because my grandfather lived here in Beavertown. My daddy was originally from Beavertown. He was born down on Reno's farm down here.
Uh-huh.
And I came up here to visit, and I liked the town. It never meant, I mean, it was no problem for me to get
It
come up here.
wasn't like moving into a hick town.
No, not knowing any person. I knew people all here in town.
Well, you had your schooling primarily in Selinsgrove,
Mm-hmm.
and your classmates were mainly from that.
Well, there were some classmates from up here.
Really?
Yeah. Gordon Whiffen and his sister Elizabeth graduated in my class. They were from McClure. And Ruth Freed, Ruth Norman now, she graduated in my class. They came down to Selinsgrove on the train, got into Selinsgrove at 9 o'clock.
And went to high school.
And came to high school. The Whiffens came the 4 years to high school down there, and Ruth came 2 years. Now wait, there was Ruth and in my class. There were more from Beavertown that came down. And there were a bunch from Kramer that came in too, that were in my class.
So they came down the train, and where was your high school down there?
Well, where the community building, where the municipal building is now, that's where the old...
Pine Street.
Yeah, that's where the old high school was.
So they didn't have too far from the train station.
No, it was just a little over, well, about 2 blocks.
Well, okay, I think we'll sort of take a little break here and continue our discussion with Mr. Camp, but thank you very much for coming on camera and sharing the Beavertown Christmas story with us.
You're welcome, I'm sure.
That was rather interesting chatting with your wife, Mr. Camp, and folks going to high school from Beavertown down to Selinsgrove, and other folks we know went to Middleburg High School. And then we got into talking why that happened. And you explained that that the high school you went to continued to operate. Well, first tell us how the high school did operate.
Well, the high school operated with a 3-year course when I went to school, and it was called the freshman and junior and senior high school.
Right, the
And,
3 classes.
the 3 classes. But it actually started, the freshman year was your 9th grade in grammar school.
So you went 8 years, and then you went a 9th year in grammar school, which was the equivalent of being a freshman year in high school.
That's right.
So that the freshman class in your high school was the equivalent of being a sophomore.
That's right.
10th grade.
That's right.
Then junior 11th grade and senior 12th grade was completed above the bank.
That's right.
Okay. Now then, about 1921, the bank building was no longer used for the Beavertown High School. They had, what, a 2-year course?
They went back down to the original school building, which is the Borough building now.
Right.
And they utilized the grammar school room for a 2-year high school, and they moved the other grades back into the other rooms. So you only had your 2 years in grammar school or high school, and that wasn't sufficient to get any credit to go to college. So in order to get your credit, you had to go to some other school, which Middleburg or Selinsgrove, which had a 4-year high school.
Uh-huh. So that certainly will fill in some holes in our understanding that we have from previous interviews, and I'm glad we touched upon that. Now the schooling that we had available here was Dr. Strohecker's Pennsylvania College of Telegraphy and Railroad Business in operation during anything you can remember?
No, I don't recall anything of that.
Because that went out of business in 1914, I guess. So you...
Well, I should remember, but I don't recall of anything like that. Dr. Stryker, you mean the MD, the medical doctor?
Right, and the pharmacy. He had a pharmacy.
Yeah, he had a pharmacy, but I don't recall him ever having a school.
To where the Kern Motor Car Company was.
Where Mrs. Weeder lived.
Right, and on the second floor there, he had a thing called the Pennsylvania College of Telegraphy and Railroad.
Well, I know that he had that at one time, but that wasn't in operation when I was a boy.
Okay. Well, then let's take another little pause here, and we'll get on to some other interesting things about Beavertown in just a moment. What you see now is a plaque presented to Mrs. Catherine Camp for her 28 years of service as president of the Ladies Auxiliary of the Rescue Hose Company here in Beavertown. She mentioned in her interview that she had 28 years of service, and here is, of course, a lovely plaque presented to her in appreciation for those many years of service. Mr. Camp has been gathering notes on Beavertown and its history for many years, and has been revising and editing and condensing these notes, and he has agreed to share some excerpts from his collected notes on Beavertown history, which he is putting together as a book. So now we'll turn the program over to Mr. and Mrs. Camp for some excerpts from Mr. Camp's book.
Well, let's go back to Joseph A. Lodge and typical Decoration Day, as we called it when I was a boy. It was a very serious celebration. The parade was large and led by local musicians playing fifes and drums. Then the remaining Civil War veterans who turned out to honor the comrades who had passed away. One such day I still recall. Brought out veterans Jacob Wetzel, Squire William Coleman, Ed Freed, Edmund Barsox, Al Carpenter, Simon Spade, William Grease, and a man I know just as Mr. Wagner. But they followed the drum corps, carrying their flag, riding proudly to the stirring tunes. Then came Joseph A. Lodge with a large turnout, followed by all the kids old enough to march and carry a bouquet of flowers. All old-time types of flowers, whippoorwill, snowball, peonies, dogwood, laurel, spirea, and so forth. These bouquets were placed on the graves of the deceased veterans, each one laid there by their living friend. Then a salute was fired, and then the speaker of the day would make a stirring speech, touching on the deeds these men had performed, or on some early historical hero, or the greatness he had died for his country. All this is gone now. I've seen a big change over my years.